Hello, Pedro? Are you there?
But I'm not hearable. So thank you and welcome. We gather here from different parts of the world to listen to one another and to create a growing solidarity, driven by both the uniqueness and the productivity. We live in a common home and we seek to produce healthy food for all of us. So I welcome particularly all of the speakers and the communities that are joining us. May we begin with a prayer. Expressing our deepest gratitude to God, our Creator, for the chance to seek strength from one another in these most trying times. We ask you, Lord, God, Creator, you blessed us with this land, and you tell us the history of our people, and you continue to sustain our lives. From the mountains and the hills, along the rivers and valleys to the shoreline and seas, we find bountiful life and ways of living. As we gather today, Lord and Creator, we ask to share in the fullness of the life you created, that as we toil, we may produce good harvests, caring for those around us, always respecting the needed balances, not only in our patch of land, but in the biomes and the climate that sustain us. Aware too of the social balances and need to celebrate a culture of peace and of sufficiency with all. As we envision this future, O Lord, we pray once again for the community and the global community that should care for all, that protects the integrity of the environment and upholds the dignity of all people. Amen.
Thank you,
Welcome
Pedro.
again to this dialogue where we seek to shed further light on how agroecology can help bring about social change. That is a global need, clearly. It's highlighted in the United Nations report, where over 2 billion people do not have regular access to safe food, nutritious, and sufficient food. This includes, and this has been one of the changes in from the millennial to sustainable goals, is it includes North America and Europe, because there 8% of the population also goes poorly fed. It's much greater in poorer countries. Over 70% of the population are dependent directly or indirectly on agriculture. We are all dependent on agriculture for food. There is no option but to revive local to global focus on sustainable agriculture. And it is a direct relationship to the broader ecological society, cycles that we have to keep in balance. Each of us here today comes with specific experiences and local context. We are hopeful that this exchange translates to greater actions on the ground and contributes to the development of communities of practice that encourage youth leadership, entrepreneurship, community-based research, and deeper understanding of our relationship with the wider ecosystem. Um, may I just ask that people go on mute, because there seems to be quite some interference this end. So I will go to some of the goals of this agroecology webinar, but I just want to read one excerpt that we were talking of earlier on from Laudato Si. Pope Francis was saying, in order to continue providing employment, it is imperative to promote an economy which favors productive diversity and business creativity. And this is where the entrepreneurship is so important. For example, there is a great variety of small-scale food production systems which feed a greater part of the world's people using a modest amount of land and producing less waste. Be it in small agricultural parcels, in orchards, gardens, hunting and wild harvesting, or local fishing. Economies of scale, especially in the agricultural sector, end up forcing smallholders to sell their land and to abandon their traditional crops. This is happening here in the village where I live. So Pope Francis is close to the ground. He says their attempts to move other more diversified means of production provide fruitless because of the difficulty of linkage with regional and global markets, or because the infrastructure for scales and transportation is geared to larger business. Civil authorities have the right and the duty to adopt clear and firm measures to support small producers and differentiated production, to ensure economic freedom from which all can effectively benefit. Restraints occasionally have to be imposed on those possessing greater resources and financial power. To claim economic freedom, while real conditions bar many people from actual access to it, and while possibilities for employment continue to shrink, is to practice a double speak, which brings politics into disrepute. Business is a noble vocation, directed to producing wealth and improving the world. It can be a fruitful source of prosperity for areas in which it operates, especially if it seeks the creation of jobs as an essential part of its service to the common good. It's section 129. So let me, before we introduce the speakers, just go through the goals briefly. We're here to share and to learn about each other's work in agroecology, community-based research, and enterprise. The second point that's there is to develop a shared understanding of needs and opportunities for food systems to change in the context of interconnected socio-economic and ecological crisis that is only exacerbated by COVID. We're here to help guide emerging food system changes and inspire action for food sovereignty and agripreneurship. And the fourth goal of our continuing discussions is to promote ecological conversion and collaboration that is called for by Laudato Si. So today's opportunities and challenges invite us to reflect on where our food comes from, on how it gets to our plate, and the people and resources behind it. We need to go deeper because injustices and vulnerabilities of business as usual are being brought to light. So let us continue from here. This particular series will go on over the coming months in different regions of the world. And I hope you will continue to join us. But for today, I hand back to Brex to introduce our speakers, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Pedro. I'd like to hand it over to Chris a little bit, who will share a little bit more about the context. Chris, I think you wanted also to give us a little overview of what we expect today.
Okay, thank you and welcome all. It's fantastic to be with you. I'll just run through briefly our the agenda for the day. We will be, after these opening remarks from Dr. Pedro Wopol, we'll have a presentation by Dr. Shiva, and I will be speaking briefly myself on agroecology and a case study in Nicaragua. And then we will introduce some of the challenges we're facing here in California, where similar issues, as Pedro mentioned in the talk, are before us. And particularly, we will hear from three, I would consider, exemplary grassroots experiences that are planting the seeds of food sovereignty in a very challenging context at a critical moment. And so I will introduce them as they come. They've all prepared brief videos from their experiences. And after this, we'll go ahead and do the next slide, please. Have a brief break so people can get up and get a drink of water or whatever they need to do. And we will come back and have a kind of discussion among those, the three case studies and broader questions that come up for 15 minutes. And then Pedro will help facilitate a roundtable, including Dr. Shiva and all of us that have been participating here. And we'll offer some brief comments at the end. Please remember that you can, and it's great to hear everybody on mute, you can use the chat box for asking questions. And welcome. It's a pleasure to be with you here, representing from the Environmental Justice and Common Good Initiative in Santa Clara University in San Jose, California.
Thank you, Chris. So with that, we are going ahead to our first speaker, who is the founder of Navdanya, a movement for biodiversity, conservation, and farmers' rights in India. She's also the founder and director of the Research Foundation for Science, Technology, and Natural Research Policy. She's authored many books on topics related to ecology and agriculture. Some of them include Biopracy, The Plunder of Nature and Knowledge, Earth Democracy, Justice, Sustainability, and Peace, and Manifestos on the Future of Food and Seed. Besides being a physicist, ecologist, activist, and editor, Dr. Vandana Shiva is a tireless defender of the environment, and she fights for changes in the practice and paradigms of agriculture and food. Everyone, let's please welcome Dr. Vandana Shiva.
Greetings to all. I'm very happy to be able to join this dialogue on land, life, and livelihoods, inspired by Pope Francis's Laudato Si. I have been at many meetings at the Vatican on redefining the global economy and shifting it from an economy of indifference to an economy of compassion, an economy of limitless greed, scientifically put into GDP and growth, but you can't have limitless growth on a planet with limits, on a planet whose very life is based on ecological limits. And the recognition that we are all members of one common family. I call it the Earth family. And we live in one common home, as Laudato Si has so clearly specified. So what are the multiple crises we are living through right now? We are living through about 30 years of a real buildup of a health emergency because people were being fed toxic food, nutritionally empty food, just because that is where super profits are made. And our mind was being shifted from seeing food as our daily bread. You know, the Lord's Prayer begins with, give us this day our daily bread. And basically the way the food economy is being shaped, it basically is give us this day our daily poison. If you look at the literature, they talk about the body as a machine and food as stuff. No, we are part of an amazing creation where food is the currency of life. And whether you look at it scientifically, which is the foundations of agroecology, everything runs on a nutrition cycle. And I will tell you more about this. But if you look at it spiritually, then everything is a sacrament. From the smallest of microbes to the planet as a whole, there is a seeking of participation in the integrity of creation. And that's the movement of bread, of nutrition, of food. 30 years, chronic diseases have been created because we redefined food to be just a commodity. And it did three things. Created chronic diseases, created hunger in the middle of the United States. There are food deserts because this is an extractive economy that takes and takes and takes without ever giving back in gratitude and without ever giving back on the basis of needs and of rights. The second thing it has done is it has been linked to a model of agriculture, which is industrial agriculture. And I've been forced to look at agriculture. I'm trained in physics, but I've been forced to look at agriculture because the place where I did my MSc in physics was such a prosperous place. And by 1984, it had become a land where huge conflicts were taking place. Most of them were protests of farmers because farmers were in debt. And this prosperous land had been destroyed by the Green Revolution. Our friends in Philippines will recognize that name very clearly because the International Rice Research Institute was set up in Philippines in order to bring chemical farming to the world. Now, the magic word that is used in industrial agriculture is yield per acre. We must increase the yield. We must increase the yield to feed the people. What is the word yield measure? I have done a book for the United Nations called The Violence of the Green Revolution, in which I went through what do they really measure? They do not measure how much you produce on your farm. They do not measure the fertility of the land on which you are growing the food. They do not measure the vitality, abundance, and health of life. They do not measure the quality of the food, which is why people eating the food, which has been turned into a commodity, are getting sick. The land is getting sick and is dying. And instead of life flowing through the system, we basically have poisons flowing through the system. We have a commodity flow increasing, but food is disappearing. Now, this mismeasure of yield, we have in Navdanya replaced it with nutrition per acre, health per acre. And as Father Pedro said in the beginning, on the small farms, we can grow enough food for not just existing humanity, but 2 times the humanity on this planet right now. There is no need for a single person going hungry. A greed-driven food system and an unscientific food system has given us hunger, but it has given us other problems, including the pandemic. Because it is such a hungry system, hungry for profits, and it's guided by mismeasures like yield, producing more and more and more GMO soya everywhere, including by burning the Amazon, the heart, the lung, the liver of this planet, for GMO soya. Now, in most parts of the world that I have studied, including my own land, we have farmed the same 1 acre, 2 acre, 3 acres piece of land, or the pastoralists have roamed the same miles of land for centuries and centuries and centuries. We've just done a new report. I invite you all to read it. It's called Gates to a Global Empire, how the billionaires now want to take our daily bread, as if they haven't made enough money. They now want our food. And I feel sad for them because they can never be satiated, and there's no joy deeper than knowing when enough is enough and knowing when you should stop. So the pandemic has grown because forests were invaded for an agribusiness model that doesn't feed the world. 300 new infections have come from the forests to us, including Ebola, Zika, MERS, SARS, and this new corona. And then, of course, there are many debates going on right now about whether it was further modified through a gain in function research. There's been a paper just published on this issue of gain in function. And interestingly, for those who don't know, the gain in function research was being done in the United States during Obama's regime. 200 scientists said it's very dangerous. It was moved to Wuhan, funded still by the United States. And then we have what's called the Wuhan virus, but it is really a combination of invading into the forests, the homes of other species, and a manipulation of living organisms, ignoring that all of creation has integrity. That integrity of creation means the integrity of life. So we have the health emergency, which is a combination of the pandemic and chronic diseases. But this is now deepening the economic emergency. The economic emergency was already severe, where 5 billionaires were controlling half the wealth of the world. And those billionaires have walked away with nearly $1 trillion while people lost their livelihoods, their jobs, their work during the lockdown. The COVID lockdown is basically an economic emergency now. And the United Nations has said 130 million additional people are going to die by the end of this year because of this lockdown. The ILO has talked about how billions will lose their livelihoods. And we're witnessing, in all your communities, you will be seeing it. But then you have other emergencies. You have the health emergencies, you've got the economic emergency, you've got the climate emergency. And I have a book called Soil Not Oil, in which I had added the different aspects of the food system. How you grow the food, that's about 14-15% of the greenhouse gases. How you invade into the forest, like the Amazon, land use change, about 20% of the greenhouse gases. how you make food move miles and miles and miles, and you process it and package it and mine that bauxite for the aluminium and the oil for the plastic. This package is another 20%. Processing and packaging is another 20%. And then because you're basing a system on uniformity and long distance transport, you throw away 4%. Greenhouse gases come from waste. So climate change is linked to an agribusiness, greed-driven, commodity-driven food system. And the same system is based on poisons. Where do the poisons come from? Let me just give you a short reminder. So Laudato Si talks very clearly about living on this common home with care and with responsibility and the duty to care. But there is also the idea of conquest over nature. Very clearly, Pope Francis has talked about these two worldviews. But then 500 years ago, there was colonialism, which was another way of conquering, and said the land is empty. The people we are conquering are not fully human. We got to civilize them. Then came the fossil fuels. 400 years, 500 years ago, colonialism, fossil fuels added to the speed and expansion of colonialism. That's how you had cotton in the Americas, grabbing the land of indigenous people, capturing people as slaves from Africa. That is why you have today people marching on the streets, Black Lives Matter, because of colonialism. Industrialism, and then you had Hitler. And every chemical we use in agriculture today comes from Hitler's lab. It's a descendant from that technology. A group of companies called IG Farben was given the task of finding ways to gas the people to death in concentration camps. That IG Farben was connected to the fossil fuel baron, Standard Oil. They had one company, Standard Oil, IG Farben. The chemicals beginning with the early poison gases, beginning with Zyklon B, and this is all in my new book called Oneness versus 1%, which has just been published by Chelsea Green. I will later put it in the chat so you can look at it. The details of this history is there. So you actually create chemicals to kill people. And then you say after the wars, why give up the profits? Rachel Carson has written about this in Silent Spring. Albert Howard has written about it in An Agriculture Testament, that those who got into the habit of making money could not give up that habit. And then they redesigned the agriculture system into an industrial agriculture system. Those chemicals are still killing. They're killing human beings. 200,000 people die every year because of pesticide poisoning. And the Central Valley of California is a disaster, as are the plantation economies of Latin America and Central America. So we've really created a poison cartel that's driving industrial agriculture. And this is leading to the other emergency of the integrity of creation. It's called the extinction emergency. What are the figures? We've lost 75% or more, 80% of the fertile soils. Right now in Nicaragua, you're having a hurricane. We never used to see mudslides of the kind we see today. We never used to see cyclones of the velocity and devastation that we see today. All of this is because of the model of agriculture. Our water systems have been destroyed. Our land has been desertified. Our people's livelihoods in taking care of the land has been devastated. And 50% of the greenhouse gases come from this system. And it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. It doesn't feed the people. It is pushed to hunger 1 billion people. And with this lockdown pandemic, that hunger crisis is a huge emergency. Every agency recognizes it. But we can do better. This is our work. This is the call. for Laudato to see. This is the call I answered when I saw my brothers and sisters in Bhopal drop dead. 7,000 died in one night when a gas leaked from a pesticide plant. The people of Bhopal call it the genocide. Others call it an accident. But when you deliberately create a poison to kill people and people die, it is not an accident. When you deliberately create a food system of extraction and peasants go into debt, it is not the peasant failure. It's a design of a system of growing agriculture without listening to the land, without following the systems. 60,000 years the Australian Aboriginals have farmed without destroying Australia. 40,000 years peasants of India and China have farmed, enriching the land. So what is the alternative? The alternative is agroecology. What is agroecology? Working with the land, working with the laws of the earth, the laws of the integrity of creation. There are two central laws in the scientific definition. The ecological systems recognize two cycles: the cycle of nutrition, which is the cycle of food, and the cycle of water. Food and water is what makes life. In my work over the last 36 years to study agroecology as well as the harms of industrial agriculture, and there's a book that has been published by Westville in India. It's called Biodiversity, Agroecology, Regenerative Organic Agriculture, which is a synthesis of 36 years of my research on agroecology. And if any of you want to publish a local version, please find a publisher. I will make sure we work out the rights and we get translation done, because this covers what happens to land, what happens to soil, what happens to water, what happens to climate, what happens to our health, what happens to farmers' livelihoods. All the details are there with a lot of scientific research. It is a textbook of agroecology. The three principles I have learned is, first, the principle of self-organization. This is the integrity of creation. But because integrity of creation and self-organization allow different expressions, we have diversity. We have diversity of species. In rice, we evolved 200,000 rice varieties in India. In maize, the Central Mexico and the Central America evolved 1,500 varieties of corn from one wild grass called teosinte. So diversity is the nature of agroecology, but most central. In science, we call it the law of return. In spirituality, I will call it the ethics of gratitude. Giving back a part of what the earth gives you as organic matter and closing the cycle of nutrition and recycling is what agroecology and organic farming is about. But this is the right way to do farming. It is the right way to live on this planet. And all of industrial agriculture driven by fossil fuels and chemicals that come from fossil fuels, and a mentality of Hitler, of war against the earth and all people, that system breaks this cycle. It gives nothing back. It just extracts, which is why we have desertification. But we also have the destruction of livelihoods of the people. It's an extraction from soil and from society. But we can build circular economies. We can build economies of giving back, of saying thank you to the earth, thank you to creation, and allowing every species to say, give us this day our daily bread, and participating in creation, which is a prayer to creation. For me, ecology is nothing but understanding that life works in harmony of self-organization, of mutuality, of giving. This is the principles of Francesco, where he said, It's only in giving we receive. This is a scientific principle. When I give to the soil will give me abundance of food. What is the challenges we face? Let me just take a few minutes for this. This is in our report on the gates to a global empire. So the Silicon Valley is not satisfied with patented software and having social media that's making everyone crazy right now and spreading hate and spreading fear. They now want agriculture. They call it digital agriculture, but they add farming without farmers. They would like lone one on the land. They would like no livelihood in food and no one to care for the land. Because the best you can do is decrease your Roundup spraying by 1%, but you can't do farming without farmers, without Roundup. Roundup glyphosate is the reason you have so much cancer, and you have 125,000 cases in America. But they don't stop there. Now there's so much soya. Only 10% of it is used for human beings. The rest is used for biofuel and animal feed. Now they want to take that GMO soya, turn it into lab food. There's a new fashionable word called plant-based diet or fake meat, Impossible Burger, Beyond Meat, all kinds of names are floating around. And the big tech firms are seeing millions of dollars, billions of dollars of profits. The Impossible Burger, which comes from California, has 14 patents associated with it. 14 patents, making fake blood, making fake protein. And they're actually talking about farming will not be for food. Farming will be to create raw materials, to grow the carbohydrates and proteins, to assemble in a lab and give you fake food. If we have a health emergency, it's because the food was not respecting the law of health. The health is a continuum. From the forests, the soil, the plants that we eat and the animals eat, to our gut microbiome. 100 trillion microbes in our gut. When you don't feed them or you feed them poison, they die. The imbalance of the gut microbiome is behind the metabolic disorders, obesity, diabetes. Toxics are causing 95% of the cancer. Neurodegenerative diseases are being caused by the gut microbiome, which is called our second brain, being damaged so that our first brain cannot function. But we have the alternative. Our work in Navdanya has shown, and it's in this book, we can feed 2 times the world population by taking care of the earth and taking care of creation. And then we will not have 2 times more population, because population increase is linked to uprooting from the land. Population is linked to economic insecurity. We have been able to see that farmers growing their own food and not chasing the dollar actually have 10 times higher incomes than those in chemical commodity farming. And our work has shown that when you give back to the earth what she's given you, the earth creates not just a lot of abundant, healthy food. The earth becomes the place for healing, where the carbon and nitrogen that is excess in the air as greenhouse gases comes back to the soil as soil fertility. This is healing the planet. Agroecology is the answer to the health emergency, to the economic emergency, to the hunger emergency, to the unemployment emergency, to the climate emergency, to the extinction emergency, and to the alienation of humanity from creation. This is our moment to return to the earth, realize we are part of creation, and perform our duties. Agroecology is where we begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vandana Shiva, for a very jam-packed presentation. I don't know where to begin there. There's a lot of things to unpack, touching on many different sides of the argument of the need for agroecology. Moving forward, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Chris Bacon, Professor of Environmental Studies at Santa Clara University and co-founder of the Environmental Justice and the Common Good Initiative at Santa Clara University. Please welcome Dr. Chris Bacon.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Shiva, for such a comprehensive talk. It's an honor to speak after you. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen to get started, and hopefully people can see. I did use some slides. I hope that's okay. It's evening here in California, and I'll be talking about some partnerships for food justice, linking participatory action research and agroecology to move towards food sovereignty in Nicaragua and in California. So as you have seen already, and I pulled this graphic from the Future Food Institute at Oxford University, food, as been explained, connects people from populations and livelihoods to the planet, from the greenhouse gas emissions estimates to land use change. It's such an important factor. And I think perhaps most importantly are the values, right, that are associated with the exchange of food, from the relationships of ethics and culture and justice and all of these different elements that are part of it. And yet I can't believe that they put a burger in the middle there. So I had to see if I could change that. And maybe it could be a plate of vegetable soup from Nicaragua with a tortilla, or a bowl of rice, which is what the majority of the world looks at for dinner every day. We've already talked about these challenges, how we've moved from an incredibly diverse agriculture to a uniform agriculture under the monocultures of the land, following monocultures of the mind. As we think, so we become, a great teacher once said. And yet, now might be the time to start going from uniformity back to diversity in a sophisticated way. I want to briefly show you my own small part of this journey, from work with smallholder cooperatives and farmer livelihoods in northern Nicaragua, some of the early fair trade cooperatives, to focusing more on diversified farming and how that links to dietary diversity, and then moving on to think particularly about food sovereignty and resilience to global change. One way to sum this up is with a brief video. I'm gonna go ahead and play it for you.
Periodo que es difícil aquí, ya es de abril, mayo, junio, julio, agosto, donde no se tiene alimento en el momento debido a la situación de lluvia. Como en esos momentos no hay lluvia. En 2012 fue la afectación directa de la plaga del arroz. Es una iniciativa que se trabaja en alianza con la Red de Agroecología Comunitaria, CAN, con investigadores, agroecólogos de la universidad y PRODECOP como central, trabajando en los 3 departamentos, Madrid, Nueva Segovia y Estelí, en los 4 pilares de la seguridad alimentaria.
Entonces, el enfoque de agroecología e investigación y acción vincularon para informar esta iniciativa.
El CIE del DENI monitoreaban todas estas acciones para ver de qué manera influían en la disponibilidad de alimentos en los tiempos de escasez.
Los materiales que se han producido ha sido la guía de buenas prácticas.
Como acción, lo que estamos haciendo nosotros primeramente, haciendo la diversificación de cultivo en nuestra área.
El CADA es un centro de acopio y distribución de alimentos.
Más que todo un intercambio de productos, por lo menos el que tiene el ayote, el pipián, por lo menos, o papa, ya se traen algún tipo de producto, el arroz, el aceite que no se cultiva en la zona.
Otra de las iniciativas que se está haciendo es como un banco de semillas, para donde nosotros podemos garantizar la semilla de nosotros como pequeños productores.
Todavía nos falta mucho que hacer, ¿verdad? Para seguir apoyando a productores, a familias.
Llueve tanto que se apaga el sol. Quiero danzar, verse siempre en tus rodillas. Un viejo está aprendiendo sus primeras letras. Dale una luz a este pueblo que ama tanto vivir en Nicaragua.
We'll go back to the, thank you so much. We're going to go back to the presentation now. So that film really offers the words of the farmers, I think, in such a powerful way. And I want to continue with our next slide here. Our approach to agroecology, like it's been said here, there's multiple interpretations, but I think some kind of look for a narrow interpretation just on ecology and agronomy to kind of a top-down disciplinary focus. Most of the people that I work with take a much broader interpretation, looking at the social sciences, local knowledge, indigenous knowledge. It's been with us for generations and generations. And think about agroecology as a transdisciplinary, participatory, bottom-up, action-oriented strategy to change the food system, right? Our effort to do this is really focused on building long-term community-based partnerships, recognizing people's history and their place. In Nicaragua, we've seen struggles, wars, debt reconciliation processes, agrarian reforms, farmer organizing. In particular, I've been partnering with smallholder cooperatives like Prodecoop that was in the film, the Campesino movement. And together we build trust and relationships. It's been over 20 years of work. And they are leading it, right? I'm a participant in some of this as we develop action research cycles. So let's just do a little bit of results real quick. This is from a forthcoming paper. Here we're looking at these lean months. In spite of these diversified activities, many farmers pass through June, July, and August, which are these well-known periods of seasonal hunger, right? You see that in the orange here. The blue are the lean water months, right? This coincides with the precipitation cycle in the study area of northern Nicaragua right now. You see a dip in June, July, right there in July and August. That's the midsummer drought. It's also, probably more importantly, corresponds with the agricultural calendar. During this period is when the corn and bean harvests have been planted, maybe in May if the rains come when they're supposed to, but the harvest is not going to be until August or September. And the corn is not going to be until November or December. The money from any coffee, if you had a cash crop, is probably spent by, maybe it was harvested in December and January, it's spent by March or April. And so at the same time, this is when some farmers, instead of being producers, are needing to purchase food. We see a spike in about 20% over the average in the price of corn during this period of time, right? So this is a major challenge. We've also seen in a survey of 162 farmers, also in 2017, perhaps not surprisingly, but it's good to see the empirical evidence, a strong correlation between on-farm diversity and dietary diversity reported in the household. Unfortunately, it's not, we are living in multi-hazard environments. We used to think that was just sort of the global south, the majority world, but it's the whole world, right? California is also a multi-hazard environment. So these are some of the hazards we faced in northern Nicaragua with our partners, including the most recent hurricane. I've been in touch with family there and colleagues, and thank goodness everybody is still okay. So what works to build resilience under these circumstances? Well, based on some of the evidence in our research, first, you've got to take seriously local knowledge, context, and the creative response of the individuals that are present. Second, from some of the statistical analysis, and this is collaborative work with my colleague Bill Sundstrom and other colleagues like Ara Stewart Fry and others, we see here that income and wealth did correlate with shorter periods of seasonal hunger, and those can be important jobs, so we want to recognize that challenge. Also, just a little bit more land, right, for those smallest farmers could make a huge difference. We see this correlation again and again, and perhaps not surprisingly, but for those promoting the agribusiness only version, we see diversified food production, especially corn and beans, were key. And there's a strong degree of resilience. But you know what? Resilience is getting overused right now. We just launched a space shuttle resilience, which makes me wonder, and I'd love to sign up from a place in Ireland, right? Stop calling us resilient. I'm not resilient because it means you want to do something to me, right? We've got to change the rules and create fairer deals for farmers and for eaters. In order to do this, I think it's important to look deeper, right? And find our own inner resilience. Kirpal Singh, one of the greatest spiritual teachers of all time, once said, "We are all drops in the ocean of all consciousness." And in Laudato Si, we know there's gratitude for the beauty of nature as creation, right? He encourages us, Pope Francis, to move away, reject consumerist culture, and think about these conversions that reconcile us with ourselves, with others, and with creation. So some of the findings here are that coffee export co-op and diversification and food security program to change food systems and hunger. The co-op that was really focused on export commodity has created a food security and food sovereignty program. They're developing plans in this direction, and yet they're also facing some of these broader structural challenges that deal with an export-oriented economy and the political economy of agriculture. This wouldn't be possible without the incredible contributions of all the youth partners in Nicaragua, researchers here at Santa Clara University, student researchers and collaborators. And so that's a little piece of Nicaragua. And I want to take now and just move right into introducing the case studies here in Northern California, right? As we are responding to COVID conditions. A lot of this came together through the work in the Environmental Justice and Common Good Initiative. Right in March, we pulled together a workshop that got together about 45 organizations and 80 people to think about these types of challenges. And we're in the Silicon Valley paradox. And Dr. Shiva's already kind of torn the veil away on this one, but yes, it's beautiful. Yes, there's a lot of money, but if we're so smart and so beautiful, why are there so many problems? In fact, one of the big problems is persistent poverty and food insecurity. So this is where we are in San Jose, it's Santa Clara County, about 2 million people. This is the Valley. Right here is sort of East San Jose. Food insecurity rates could be, as high as 20, 30% in some cases. We know pre-pandemic, the food system was already broken for far too many people, right? High costs of transit. Silicon Valley residents were struggling to meet their basic needs. Great report by Silicon Valley Institute for Regional Studies here I'm citing. They estimate that food insecurity went up from 10% to 22% in California, slightly lower in the Valley here, but still very significant. And food prices were rising, right? We're seeing the breakdown of the dominant food systems. And of course, not surprising, there's disproportionate impacts based on race and on income. So what has been done? Well, one of the major responses, and I really want to give credit to the food banks and the mainstream food assistance system. They have stepped up, and there's tens of millions of people that were hungry and distributed valuable food, including some of the public systems, public food systems, right? Hundreds of millions of meals have been served this way to people that were in lockdown conditions and not necessarily leaving their houses, right? But if we're interested in building food sovereignty, what does this look like? This is kind of food security work. It's important. It's probably going to be part of the response. Maybe we need to also think about bringing these people into dialogue with broader systems of change, right? What if all those that need the public assistance are also in dialogue with these seeds of food sovereignty, right? Food sovereignty movement is still pretty incipient, and the food sovereignty research, for that matter, is still developing, right? There's a lot we can do and a lot more that needs to happen. So I'm really pleased to present what I would consider 3 seeds of food sovereignty in Northern California that have creative responses to these dynamic challenges. Now that's what we're going to be moving into right now. The first one is going to be a testimonial and a video from Raul Lozano from Valle Verde, the grassroots food justice organization. He's the founder and executive director of Valle Verde, 22 years of experience doing nonprofit leadership. And he first launched this program a couple years ago and has launched a follow-up program with a strong commitment to multiculturalism in the arts. He was one of the founders of the Multi-Ethnic Arts Community Initiative here in San Jose. He's also a founding member of the first ACT Silicon Valley Civic and Arts Initiative and spurred development in the arts district. So an artist, an entrepreneur, a food system reweaver. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Raul for 3 experiences, the first of 3 experiences of how we're trying to respond to these challenges here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. So what we're going to see a short film on how we, as an organization, started trying to figure out how we can help people feed themselves through the pandemic here in California. As we were getting deeper and deeper into the pandemic in February, there were the beginnings of mass layoffs of people losing their jobs because of the pandemic. And we decided as an organization, we have greenhouses. We have 4 greenhouses of our own. So all of our seedlings that we grow for our programs and for community work, we grow them ourselves. And so we decided to grow extra seedlings in these greenhouses to help families that were laid off of their jobs. And we're talking hundreds of thousands of people that were laid off, and we're just struggling to feed their families. So we grew enough seedlings for spring planting to help 900 families, 1,500 families. So we grew over probably about 12,000 seedlings to distribute. We didn't do it all ourselves. We partnered with Stanford University. They have a greenhouse. They contributed 600 seedlings. Santa Clara, the Forge over there, they contributed about 300 seedlings. We grew the bulk of them. And so we had a distribution day when we had drive-throughs and people would come by and they would get a bag of seedlings, packets of seeds, and we would ask them to send us a photo of their garden once it's planted to make sure that they're actually planting gardens. And we received about 150 photos. We also had families that were just not comfortable leaving their homes because of the pandemic. So we partnered with the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition, and they recruited about 75 bikers, and they literally just delivered these bags of seedlings to these homes. So it was a great success, and we met our goals to try and help as many families as we could. So we did another one for the winter plant, and we helped about 900 families. And we're probably going to do another one in the spring, and hopefully things will get better before the winter. And but if it isn't, we'll do it again. So.
Thank you, Raul. Let's go ahead and play the video.
My name is Raul Lozano. I'm the executive director of Valley Verde, and we're in downtown San Jose, California. Today we're giving out seedlings for families to plant a garden in their backyards.
The importance is for us is that people learn to grow their own food, so they become self-sufficient. And we are giving them different varieties of seedlings like tomatoes, cucumbers, zucchinis, that they will be able to grow in their own houses, in their own backyards.
The ability to have access to good, healthy, wholesome food is a lot of times taken for granted. So by giving people the tools needed to grow their own food, teach them how to fish rather than buying fish, it helps them in the long run. And especially low-income families and such around San Jose, they're some of the most vulnerable to these types of events. So we're here to help them and help them in any way that we can by showcasing how to grow food.
What prompted the call to action was the fact that the pandemic has caused a lot of layoffs. So all these families are inundating food banks around the Bay Area and across the country. And we just felt that we could help them out a little bit by giving them seedlings to plant a garden in their own yards.
But once this whole crisis hit us, we had to rethink about what was going to be our role with the community. So we decided to use all the seedlings that we already had, plant many more on top of that, and partner with master gardeners and with Stanford and the Forge Garden to be able to provide to our community.
At this time, in this time of crisis, it is so important for folks to be able to have access to fresh food. And we're seeing the food system breaking down. Quite frankly, it's been broken for quite a while. A lot of folks have a hard time affording quality food, and that's one of the challenges that Raul and Valley Verde have been working on is helping folks kind of create food sovereignty through being able to grow food for themselves and their families at their homes and their backyards. So it feels good for us to be able to help out at least a little bit.
We're at Valley Verde's farm called the Finca, It utilizes UAIZ framework, urban agriculture incentive zoning. So they're able to take over vacant plots of land and turn them into usable agricultural space.
We are here today because we got a call from Raul at Valley Verde. Last year we had done a bike ride where we came and we visited different urban farms, and this was one of them. So we learned about this great program, and then he learned about us, and he picked up the phone and he said, "Hey Shiloh, I have this idea. What do you think if you guys organized a bunch of bike volunteers to come and deliver seedlings?" And I thought it was a fantastic idea. From a biker's perspective, at this time when we're in the midst of a pandemic, people are really craving some way to be helpful. If you can marry those being helpful with riding a bike, it's like, that's perfect.
Great turnout in the drive-through and really good response from our families with regards to the delivery service and having the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition help them deliver that. And now that we have another seedling coming up, the reception and the press that we've gotten has caused a whole bunch of groundswell. So I'm really excited for this next seedling giveaway, and yeah, it should be cool.
Thank you for that inspiring work by Valley Verde and Raul and team. Let's go ahead and move on to our second experience of a response here. This is Andy Olive from Fresh Approach. Andy's a Food Access Program Director at Fresh Approach. He's been working at increasing the linkages between small-scale farmers, mission-driven farms to communities who have historically been denied access to healthy food landscapes. He's a unique program interventions around the country to address these challenges, from the Bronx in New York City to across the Bay Area. He's going to be sharing an innovative project that initially received some funding from the government and then has continued on in different ways, linking, I'll let him describe it in his own words to the video, and then answering any questions afterwards. Charles, do you want to? Andy, are you here too?
I am here. But this is a video of me.
My name is Andy Olive. I work for... Hi. My name is Andy Olive. I work for an organization called Fresh Approach in the San Francisco Bay Area, where we believe that locally grown food should be the foundation for healthy communities. Locally grown food feeds both our bodies and our minds. It heals our land and our environment. It broadcasts our cultures and heritage. It provides economic opportunity to immigrants and people of color. At the start of COVID-19, my organization and a farm called Pie Ranch began an emergency food hub. We purchased food from 10 small organic growers severely impacted by the loss of business. We prioritized immigrant farmers and farmers of color. We then packed that food into CSA boxes and delivered them to a dozen community-based organizations in 7 cities, who then distributed them to the families in need. When more funding became available for this work, we chose not to double down operations at Pie Ranch and increase their output. We instead took that funding and made 7 other emergency food hubs that brought in 40 other farms, reached 30 more community organizations, and ultimately reached thousands more families every week. The impact of our project over this year has been more than the 800,000 pounds of food we delivered to 30,000 families. It has been more than the $2 million we invested into small farms. When you zoom out, you see those big numbers, but when you zoom in, you see the 5 farms we worked with that use this as an opportunity to receive higher level food safety certifications. You see the 3 urban farms who had never run a CSA program before and learned to do so and are keeping them going today. You see how we were able to include nutrition resources in every box, and you see how in many cases the families who received the food lived just 2 miles from where it was grown. When we think of scaling, we often think of building big, of increasing our pack houses and buying new trucks and refrigeration. We did the opposite. We recruited and activated the smallest players in our food system, trusting them to run a farm box program as well as the famous farms nearby. Each of our 8 mini food hubs took the opportunity of emergency food relief and grew from it, and reinvested the resources back into their own programs while cycling every dollar through multiple farms. This project came about because of COVID-19, but where we want to take it next is into the world after COVID-19. As long as food banks exist, we believe we should look to our local farmers to act as emergency food responders. We showed in this project that we can move not just any food, but the healthiest and highest quality food as efficiently as food banks, and in some ways more efficiently, when you consider miles traveled and how each dollar provided economic stimulus to multiple organizations and farms. Resiliency doesn't mean building something new, it means investing what's already here. Thank you, and thanks for having me. Hi.
Excellent. And we will have a roundtable and question and answer session with all three of these case studies immediately following the final one here. So there's not any immediate follow-up. I want to go ahead and introduce our third case, and then we can move into our dialogue portion here. Fernando Fernandez-Levia is the Mesa Verde program manager. He's background in political science and environmental movements from Cochabamba in Bolivia. He was a volunteer with the Jesuit Church and a project in indigenous communities, and is interested in using agroecology as a methodology for supporting traditional agriculture and community engagement. We have a brief video, I believe, from La Mesa Verde program that was also reacting to the conditions under COVID and the food insecurity in the area. And Fernando, are you here as well?
Yes, I'm here.
El interés de las plantas viene porque mi papá de pequeño me enseñó, yo lo miraba, a él yo lo miraba como él y se iba al campo, como nos traía pepino, como le gustaba cosechar calabazas porque se les daba a los animales, que le dice a las yeguas o a los puercos. Entonces, a mí sí puedo decir que viene con ellos. Honestamente, te voy a decir la verdad, lo que me pasó personalmente a mí, que estoy muy agradecida con la Mesa Verde y con Dios porque me dio la oportunidad de participar en Mesa Verde. 2 semanas sí me dio el impacto de la cuarentena, me deprimí mucho y te puedo decir que esas 2 semanas no le ponía tanta atención a mejor a mi jardín por que me dejé caer o algo, pero los restos del tiempo me la he pasado en mi jardín y eso me ha ayudado que me dé mi alegría porque miro mi fruto, que porque si miro un animal se lo quito, lo ataco yo en vez de que ataque mis plantas. Entonces, al mirar a mi propio esposo dijo, nunca te había mirado tan emocionada como una niña chiquita con un juguete nuevo. Dice, se te mira tu semblante en tu cara, tu rostro, cómo se mira la satisfacción que traes contigo misma por mirar tu propio cultivo. Y siempre, si viene a veces de trabajo, amor, mira qué tengo aquí. Y le doy igual un recorrido por mi milpa, por mis gallinas, por mis jitomates. Entonces la cuarentena ayudó que a mi hija le gustara comer rábanos.
I believe that my garden has been really a positive effect on my community. I've had a couple of people stop by, take pictures. My neighbor has asked for tomatoes. I've had people ask for jalapenos, parsley, cucumbers, and I willingly give it away. They've also asked me, did you do this yourself? Did you put in the bed yourself? And I always tell them about the La Mesa Verde and how they came to my rescue and blessed me with these boxes and the plants that I could grow with my own hands.
I am so grateful that I have this garden here, because there's days when you don't know what time it is, you don't know what day it is, you can't go outside, you can't go to the store, you can't go to the movies, you can't hang out with your friends. So coming out here and just working the garden, listening to the birds, watching the bees as they land on the flowers has been very therapeutic to me. It's a blessing. It's a blessing to watch a seed sprout from the ground and grow into something that you can actually eat.
Okay, let's go ahead and give it up for our 3 case studies of these pretty creative responses and open up for some questions and dialogue from all. We'll start immediately with these cases, and I want to ask if there is anything additionally that Andy or Fernando would like to add from the case from Fresh Approach or La Mesa Verde, and then let's open up to questions. People can put their questions in the chat, would probably be the easiest.
Yes, this is Fernando from La Mesa Verde at Sacred Heart Community Service, San Jose, California. Thank you very much for this invitation, and I just want to say that for our program, gardening, it's a really important thing, and provide materials and organic classes, organic gardening classes is really important, but also for us, developing leadership skills in our community and organize our community to have influence on those who take decisions, the policymakers. It's the key part of this work. Because for us, it's not enough to have a beautiful garden and have healthy food access in your family. What we are trying to do is have influence in those who take decision in the food system. So we want to empower our community, first of all, to grow food, but also to empower them and organize them to have influence in politicians and where the decisions are making. So that is something I learned from Bolivia in the agroecology approach is we need to know that our members in our community have a lot of knowledge and experience, and we need to value those things. We are not the experts here. We just are facilitators in this process to empower them. So we need to recognize their role in this movement and provide them all the opportunities and support what we can do, but they are the protagonists in this process to change the food system. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, and Andy, would you like to add anything, or we go ahead and move into a couple of questions I have, if not?
No, I don't think so. Thank you so much for having me, and Raul and Fernando, really great videos. I did not, didn't feel matching that, but I just want to echo what Fernando says about that we are just facilitators, and a lot of my work is less about what my organization did and more about collectivizing the work of a lot of us and coming together to share in our successes and also share in the resources available. Yeah, so happy to go to questions from there.
Okay, 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll see if anybody has them from the audience. Otherwise, I have a couple at the ready. Yeah, some inspiration that we're seeing on there. I mean, one quick question is, so one challenge that I laid out at the end of the presentation for introducing these cases is the question of scale, right? We know there's, hundreds of millions of meals just in the Bay Area that are missing. How do we see these kind of food sovereignty oriented efforts beginning to address the challenge of meeting the scale of demand for healthy, nutritious food and for meaningful engagement in people's lives in terms of addressing the traumas that people have lived through and building community?
Who want to start?
I think anybody can go.
Okay. Let me go first, Raul. So we are a really small program, and we provide material for 50 families per year. That means if we want to have influence and we want to change the food system, yes, we need to develop alliance, and we need to work in cooperation with other programs, communities, and that are in the same page with us, or at least they share a few values, because the system need divide us, they need separate us, they need make us fight for reserves. When we need to apply for grants, we are all fighting for those fresh dollars to increase the number of members who participate in our programs. But we need to move on into our approach to understand that only united we will have influence, and we will have enough power to influence those who take decision in the system. Because the corporation world and also the politicians, they are super united, and they don't fight each other. They make us believe they fight, but they don't fight each other to maintain the social order or maintain the system working really well for the profits. But we who work with the community, we need to look forward, understanding that only united we can achieve the goals we are looking for. And that is not just provide gardening experience, it's change the food system.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, we have very similar values. Valley Verde is La Mesa Verde. Fernando and I talked and are planning some food sovereignty work and partnership activities that we want to try and develop in the community. But when I first started Valley Verde, the home garden was the central piece of our work. And then, but very, very quickly, I realized it wasn't the garden. It was about building knowledge within the community to have the knowledge base to grow a healthy garden to feed themselves. So they don't have to depend on resources outside of the house to grow healthy organic vegetables to feed their families. And that bled into other issues that we use the garden to empower the families to change the food system. We're not there yet. We're still working with the families and stuff, but that's the primary goal, is to address food justice here in Santa Clara County, and we leverage our home garden to get to that goal. The families are very grateful for the program that we take out to their communities, but again, it's the deeper, more intensive work that we do with these families to make a better life for themselves within their communities.
And in our project, we worked with 8 hub organizations, each of them delivering boxes of produce. The smallest of these projects was an urban farm in San Jose that was delivering 40 boxes a week to the families in their community. And the largest farm in this project was a big fruit orchard that was delivering 1,000 boxes a week. I think often in our work, in our field, we hear about building a better food system or building the solution. But the actual activity of this project is super simple. It's just buying food, putting it in a box and delivering it. It's not that we need to have a major scaling, building a bigger warehouse, more refrigeration, more trucks. Scaling isn't about building a bigger operation. It's about recruiting more organizations and valuing that urban farm that's doing 40 boxes a week as equally as the farm doing 1,000 boxes a week. And for me as a network coordinator, it was the same amount of work to have that urban farm versus that major orchard. And for that urban farm, Vegelution, they're still, them being part of this project allows them to take an overhead fee that they can then reinvest into their hyper-local food system. So for us, scaling is allowing for the fact that anyone can do this work. It's not hard. The food is out there. All we need to do is activate philanthropic resources in a way to think less about building big, but building networks and building network capacity. And for us, that means really activating a preparedness network of the smallest organizations, because those smallest organizations are actually bringing some of the most compelling missions to work. The Vegelution, that farm right in the neighborhood of Fernando and Raul, the relationships they have with those 40 families are just so tight. They're even offering them jobs in their current box activities. So yeah, scaling is just for us network expansion.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank all three experiences and sort of kick this open to Pedro and questions for Pedro Walpole, for Dr. Shiva, and kind of open up the broader discussion now. And Pedro, if you want to say anything to open up the roundtable dialogue, happy to kick it over to you and your team up in the mountains of the Philippines.
Thank you. Thank all of you. Time is of importance here. We've had a lot of input, so I will not review the speakers. I think there are thoughts and experiences you have that really must connect, I am quite sure, and questions you want to pursue. So I would like, first of all, to open up this to the speakers, to draw some of the connections that are there. I think that this is part of the learning process of not why are we doing these things. Vandana Shiva has explained much of the why as to where we are, and the challenge now is to look at how. And we've had several local experiences there. So I would ask, in terms of the speakers, whether there are further connections and relations that you see that you would like to share, and how we can go about this. So, sorry, Dr. Shiva, you've been sitting there for some time. You've been hearing many of the inputs here. Maybe there is something you would like to add and affirm in the process.
Dr. Shiva, please unmute your mic.
Yes. But I wanted to just thank Father Pedro, I want to thank the Eco-Jesuits, thank Chris. I'm so glad to have met you. And I want to thank the amazing initiatives of Silicon Valley. Now, you know, I've been doing this work 36 years, and I am so happy because my dream was gardens should come up around Silicon Valley to allow the world to know money doesn't, you know, first of all, that fictitious money is not the true wealth and well-being. And the gardens that are growing in the midst of this crisis, and the 3 videos we showed, and I hope all of you, when we will all keep in touch. I want to just address 2 issues that came up in the discussion, and this always comes up, the issue of scaling. You know, we can scale out horizontally. And I think James elaborated that scaling up means more people participate. And Gandhi put it in beautiful language, you know, ever expanding circles, with each person being the center of each circle. So there's a scaling out horizontally, it's circular, and it is decentralized, but in harmony. Yeah. And then there's a scaling up. And the scaling up is vertical. It involves fewer people. It replaces, in agriculture particularly, it replaces people with chemicals and machinery, and that digital agriculture idea of farming without farmers is really the highest level. A garden is a place of diversity. The scaling up, as we've seen, which is being put on fast forward with lab meat combined with large-scale farming, producing raw materials of protein and carbohydrates, this has no place for people. But it doesn't produce food. And therefore, it will, A, lead to deepening of the food crisis. But more importantly, it will lead to a desperation of eating fake food. So what is the how that Father Pedro is suggesting we address? I think first is, the network is already here. For 20 years, I've been working with widows whose husbands committed suicide. We've lost 400,000 farmers in India because of debt and suicide. We started Gardens of Hope. And what I witnessed with the amazing presentations was these are new gardens of hope being created. What I would love to do with the Eco-Jesuits, with Dr. Pedro, with Chris and the network in California is basically work on the garden, a garden of hope. Create a gardens of hope all over the world. And this could be a common program we take together. And Navdanya, the movement I started, Navdanya International, are there for our little service. But the garden shows that we need diversity, not monocultures. We need our own seeds. And I loved your phrase, seeds of food sovereignty, because we work on seed sovereignty and food sovereignty. And if you're buying a GMO seed, you'll never have food sovereignty. So diversity, but I think the most important part that is the big gap, as I see, is work, the place of work. Because Silicon Valley is working on a future where there is no work. There's algorithms and artificial intelligence and robotics, including in farming. And work for creation rather than work that is about being exploited. I think redefining work, I mean, when Pope Francis talked about redefining the economy, I think redefining work. And from the garden, we can redefine work, that this inevitability of joblessness, of unemployment, of hunger doesn't have to be. We can redefine work in the garden, in the growing of food, in the distribution, in local processing. And when the argument is made, or the cities are big, and these are small initiatives, but show me one form of life that begins big. Every living system begins in the small. We begin as small embryos. We begin with a seed. We begin with a garden. And every large is a coherent harmony of multiple smalls. We need billions of gardens. And around every city, and this is something that you can do and we can do with you, if around Santa Clara and San Jose, and I would like to introduce you, Chris, to my colleague, the president of Friends of Navdanya. She's based in Santa Barbara, and I'm sure she'll be very happy to work together. Can you imagine if you made a plan of 5 years down the line? This is what the food shed of these cities will look like. It will need this many more gardens. It will need this many more farmers growing food. It'll mean this many more cyclists delivering the food. It'll mean this much more learning centers teaching people about the soil and the seed. And our Earth University courses that we offer, we are more than happy to partner on this. I think it is really a moment to redefine what the future of humanity will be through the future of food, because we are what we eat. I'm very happy to have been able to participate in and be witness to these amazing presentations. It took me back 36 years, but I'm so glad that around the world, in spite of every attempt to shut things down. Just one last thing. You know, when I started to work on seed, I realized there was a WTO with Agreement of Agriculture, intellectual property on seed, and sanitary and phytosanitary measures. What are these measures? They make local processing illegal and they impose junk food. And I am absolutely sure the next step that will be worked will be real food is dangerous for you. Fake food from the lab is the only safe thing. And they're working towards it. This is where the freedom that Father Pedro mentioned, the basic freedom, economic freedom that Laudato Si has referred to. We need to reclaim our freedom, but helping it grow from the gardens that you are all growing. And the last, absolutely last point I want to make is for Philippines, Father Pedro, there's just been, this report I talked about. The CG system was created for chemicals. The ERI was created for chemically grown rice. Now ERI has been taken over and all the CG seed banks have been taken over by Bill Gates. And there's a huge movement to have ERI shut down and the seeds come back to farmers. And you are placed in such a strategic position for helping farmers of all of Asia and the rice eaters get back the seed. It is a campaign we will be starting probably in February or March. And I hope we can together work on this, taking back the seed, to protect it, to love it, to safeguard it for creation.
Thank you. Thank you. That is very inspiring and very encouraging. From San Francisco to the Philippines, you give us much work to do for creation. Let me shift to some of the other speakers. They may want to respond to some of the questions there. And we need to keep a little time for people, the hundreds of people who are still watching. And you can send questions and we will try to respond beyond the time of this. So Chris, Raul, other people.
Sure. I just want to say, I do think there's a lot of potential here in building these networks and partnering for the common good. Just having, I think, I want to bring attention to one of my colleagues who's also on the phone, because we have two of the most important places where the Green Revolution was spread after coming out of the United States, which was Mexico, and then it was India, right? And so I want to bring attention to a comment in the chat from another great agroecologist, Francisco Rosal May, who says, to the Maya food sovereignty. In fact, Francisco, why don't you go ahead and say it in your own words? I want to invite you into this conversation and let you speak to that, because I think there's a real potential in the room right now. And I'll pass it to you to review your comment.
Thank you, Chris. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to throw in another aspects in agroecology that includes the ways of constructing knowledge from the indigenous people. And I took the opportunity when the word food sovereignty was mentioned to make a comment in which the Maya think that the concept of food sovereignty as we understand it is incomplete. To them, the driving force behind the thinking, which is a driving force behind their actions in creating their own food, combines food sovereignty with food sufficiency and food security. And the best way to express their thinking is in the phrase, I want to make sure that I can produce enough food so that I do not have to go to another town and buy it. So that expression summarizes that thinking, which is important. It's a combination of food sovereignty, but also sufficiency and security. And it makes sense. Look at the national policies. Even FAO says food sovereignty with nutrition. That means, and the word nutrition was added recently. Food sovereignty doesn't necessarily mean that the food is being produced with local conditions and in the country. They make sure that there is food, but the food comes from different countries, from different ways of producing it. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you, Chris.
And I'm noticing a number of other questions here that have come up. A summary, thank you, Brex, for those. From John Kennedy, what are the possible alternatives? What are the good practices we need to affirm proactively and promote? I think this may have been earlier in the presentation, so hopefully we're able to show some examples of diversified farming among smallholder farmers in Nicaragua, and the rich, diverse gardens that we saw in California. There's many, many more examples from India and around the world that Vandana touched on in her talk. It is important, I do believe, to really link those specific practices to changes in people's livelihoods and well-being. There can be an idea that more diversity is always better. I'm somewhat sympathetic to that, but it's hard to know what strategies work for whom and under what conditions. And we did show some evidence, right, in multiple places, how these gardens can not only improve access to food and a sense of empowerment, but also rehabilitation and the post-traumatic work that Dr. Shiva has done with people, spouses of victims of suicide and recovery. The recoveries we see even in San Jose from some of the work of La Mesa Verde and Raul, and the idea of food as medicine. So hopefully, there are some alternatives. Again, they will all need to be contextualized and lived out in practice. I don't know if anybody else wants to take on some of the other questions that came up there.
Chris?
Yes.
Hello? Yeah, it's on. I want to say just two things. One, on the issue of practice, we kind of, the minute it's about practice, we shrink into methods of cultivating food rather than methods of organizing.
Good point.
And that's where the economic freedom comes into the picture. I think that's where the gap is. If we can fill the gap on the practice of economic freedom, which means how do you value work? And where the farm workers and the farm justice issue comes in. How do you value nourishment in the food? We know 70% of the nutrition is lost in industrial food. And our work in Navdanya is showing you just say thank you to the earth, give back organic matter. Our soils are increasing zinc. Chemical soils are decreasing zinc. The discussion on the pandemic has shown zinc is a very important element in immunity building. But when your food is nutritionally empty with zinc, or magnesium, all these trace elements, with the value of knowledge. This has been my life's work. How can we disregard 20,000 years of knowledge for an experiment of genocide extended to our fields? That's not knowledge. Knowing how to kill is not knowing how to live. So I think practice needs to be broadened.
Yeah.
There was a question on the issue of what do we think of hydroponics and vertical farming in cities. Our dialogue is on land, livelihoods, and life. Sadly, all three are missing in the vertical gardens of Jeff Bezos. I think around Los Angeles, he's bought out Whole Foods, and now he wants to make this, he wants to say bye-bye to the sun. The sun is a problem. Have artificial lights. No one has done research on what is the nourishment of the plants. When you put 5 chemicals that are also owned as proprietary chemicals, they are patented chemicals in those systems without soil. No one has given me a nutritional audit. No one has given me an energy audit. Industrial farming uses 10 units of input to produce a pathetic 1 unit of output as food which is nutritionally empty. These are foundational issues about the food system. And therefore, in transforming the food system, we have to combine the very concrete, this community, this garden, this squash, this seed, with the planetary, which is the work of Laudato Si. And when the two come together, these little initiatives will be the scaling up on a planetary scale without increasing power and control in the hands of 5 people. It will bring power to every life form, every community. And this to me is the big issue. Yeah, a little experiment on hydroponics is fine, but to imagine that'll be the food system is to imagine you'll eat nutritionally empty food, that you will have patterns, that you'll have no sun, you'll have no soil, you'll have no seed. Not a very good future for my imagination. I'd rather go back to the land and life and livelihoods.
Point very well taken on the depth of practice. You're absolutely right. I mean, I think that's often the secret, right? Is actually doing the practice and living into it. And from all dimensions, from the way we organize to the way we grow to our own spiritual practices. I really appreciate you bringing our attention to that.
Something you mentioned, Chris, briefly was food is medicine. And when we're looking at the food system, that's something that we're hearing about way more. How do we recognize that food is wellness and health and can correct major health inequities in our communities? But for us, everything comes back to the fact of income inequality and how oppressive systems have built this food system. And the way forward really needs to come back to the redistribution of wealth. When we think of food as medicine, and you think in America, how now people are saying we need universal health care. Well, the way to do that without all of the infighting in politics is to just give food away for free. And you already have the systems to do that. You already have hunger relief efforts, but we haven't yet thought about how our emergency food relief, hunger relief is actually health equity. And further than that, when you send the money, when you use food supply chains and local food chains to redistribute the wealth in this imagination, then that money can flow to the smallest players and the smallest farms, which are the more mission forward, the ones healing the land. So there's actually an avenue to bring these disparate, in our world, funding categories. Like all of these foundations have their various interests, but bring them together to show that it's a connected system and move the money more fluidly through it all the way back to the farmer. So for us, like looking forward, it's showing to funders who created a lot of these issues, showing to them that you can connect these different systems and spread the wealth efficiently via food chains.
Pedro, I'll kick it back to you.
Thank you. I'm conscious of the time, and the bell for food here rang half an hour ago. So very hungry participation in the group. I think we've really run the course of the program. I am hoping with the system we have all the questions, and we can discuss some of these questions further and keep in communication with people. So I'm looking at wrapping it up at this stage unless there are violent objections. We're deeply grateful for the speakers and the participants in it. And I'm hoping we can keep this going. So Eco Jesuit is opening a platform on Agroecology. It has opened it. So we're going to invite you to populate that and continue our discussions there, and then open up again, hopefully with Dr. Shiva again, another round, either later this year or earlier next year, as we talk around the areas. And we want to invite all of you to join this effort on the common good and ecological justice that Chris and so many other people are highlighting. So I'm not sure whether I'm supposed to do the closing remarks, but I think Chris has the last comment here.
Go ahead.
I would like to so it's impossible to synthesize all of this. I feel the synthesis in part is already making its web there, and we have to watch what happens to the rice seeds, yeah, in the coming year from our perspective here and across the world, but so many other seeds. So without me getting poetic, let me hand this over to Chris for final comment.
I'll just like to say on behalf of the Environmental Justice and Common Good Initiative at Santa Clara University, it's been an honor to partner with all of you in bringing together this first truly global dialogue on agroecology for food systems change. I think we heard people speak with their head, with their heart, and based on the work they've been doing with their hands. And we've reiterated both the global challenges and the possibilities, right? Crisis always brings it with it the seeds of possibilities to rethink, remake, and expand what we've been doing, many of us, for sometimes for decades, or even it's your first or second time and you want to experiment planting up your first garden bed. That's amazing, right? So let's just thank all the speakers, all of you who are staying up late at night or early in the morning to be here. We have over 90 people are still with us, and have a great day, a great evening, and may God bless.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Chris, I hope your family is fine in Nicaragua.
Thanks a lot. Dr. Shiva, Chris, Pedro, Brex.
Thank you.
Everybody. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that. Hi, Nancy.
So great, Chris.
That was great. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Nancy, it's got to be pretty late in Chicago.
A little after 10, it's not too bad. Thank you for making this happen, Chris.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
It's a real partnership with the Jesuit networks in Asia and Pedro, but it's been great.
Terrific. Yeah.
And all the work of the local food justice groups in California. I've been wanting to share some of these stories and have them participate.
And Chris, we will get connected more because Dr. Shiva also opened up some possibilities. In fact, she has a good university here. I mean, where its practice is going on. You know, we can see how in the coming years we can plan some things together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Lots of ways to partner.
Good presentations and deliberations. Yes. Thanks a lot, Chris. Good preparations also. Yeah.
Yes. We all did our best. Let's give thanks to Brex too for all of his organizing work.
Yes. Brex and Charles. And we had plan A, plan B, and yes, it's wonderful.
Yes, Charles.
Thanks,
yes.
Charles.
Thank you, Raul and Francisco and everybody for tuning in. It's been great to see some faces from around the world here.
Yes, and that also early morning for some countries like us, 8 o'clock morning. Yeah. Late evening for you, right, Chris? Yeah.
Late
Yeah,
evening, and for
8:30. Yeah, not too bad.
the group of people with Pedro there, hope they have a good breakfast.
A special thanks to Pedro. I think they can hear us. That's what they should hear. Pedro,
tell
I
them.
think they were trying to say hi. Oh no, there's. I think it's lunchtime.
Yes.
Okay. Have a good night, all.
We're
Take
just
care.
having a quick wrap up.
Yeah.
Adiós, Francisco.
Thanks again. Chris, ¿cómo está tu familia? Mari, ¿cómo están ahí en Nicaragua? Espero que estén bien.
Vivos todavía.
Yeah, everybody's.
They
Oh.
have like 16 persons have been dying for the whole country. It was a huge prevention effort, a lot of landslides, but I think we are celebrating like solidarity, compassion. When many people, many households open their doors to receive other families who were in need. Every single family is sharing even half a pound of rice, half a pound of beans to feed other families. And that is just bring us as a country together.
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
yeah, from my family, everyone is alive and trying to help others.
And we heard from our colleagues and the co-opers I was talking about today. I mean, there's landslides and things, but all the 10,000 members of the co-op, at least as of this morning, were, but there was no reports of serious injury or death.
Okay.
And from other colleagues, it's going to be a big rebuilding. They lost most of the harvest, right?
yeah.
The corn and bean harvest, and who knows about the coffee. But they are surviving, and it was a lot less damage than Hurricane Mitch, right? Hurricane Mitch in 1998, for those that are aware, was the last Class 5 hurricane to hit Nicaragua, and then we just had 2 in a row in the last 2 weeks. It's just unbelievable. But I think there were some. There was more, as far the preliminary evidence is, there was a lot less loss of life this time around, and we're hoping there can be a swift rebuilding. Also, Honduras and El Salvador and Guatemala were all impacted, so there's going to be a lot of work in Central America.
Yeah. And our little baby have become a young farmer now.
Nice to see you. One more joining you on the.
Well, have a good night or good day, everyone.
Yeah, along with Charles, we have here in our office Surbi. She's a manager, HR. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to Charles. Thanks to.
All right.
Breck, thank you, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care, please.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.